Hey, everybody, welcome to the New Orleans Pelicans show. Lady, man, Lord show here on Old Man Squad Sports Network. I'm Dan Vespris, stumbling and bumbling and fumbling my way through the beginning of this thing. My light is way bright right now. Let's fix that. That's better. And now we can get cooking. You may notice that up in the corner on YouTube, I'll pretend like I'm looking up at it, we have a new partner here on the show, and it's our good friends at FanDuel. That's right. We're stepping up in the world, baby. We've gone domestic with our online sports betting partner, the good folks at FanDuel Sportsbook, now a proud partner of the Believe Network. And of course, we are a member of that. So we'll work some of that into the mix as we work our way through today's show. And I guess we can just start by telling you guys that FanDuel has the Pelicans with a regular season win total for this coming year of 29.5. Sportsbooks do not think particularly favorably of the New Orleans Pelicans. And stay tuned, because coming up at some point, I'm going to do my season win total episodes of this podcast. Normally, I split it up into 6 episodes, one for each division, but we might have to condense it a little bit, kind of rapid fire our way through those things, because leagues are probably going to open in the next 10 days or less. And then you guys are just going to want to hear me talk about fantasy draft stuff anyway. So welcome. I guess it's both sides. Welcome to being a partner, the good folks at FanDuel, and welcome to us being a part of the FanDuel Partner Network here on Believe. So that's pretty damn cool. I feel like we've taken a pretty good-sized leap forward. And, yeah, check them out over there. So let's talk Pelicans here. I know that was a longer intro than usual, but, we got a kind of an important new thing going on here on the show. I also have to figure out how to do this show without covering up that logo. That's a new task to figure out. I'm an audio guy doing video. So the Pelicans last year were not very good. They couldn't defend anybody. And weirdly, they didn't score as well as folks anticipated. Certainly, I thought they'd be better on the offensive side. But they were just kind of like medium bad at everything. They went 21-61. That's a terrible year. They were also snake bit, to be fair. Zion was hurt again. Not to anybody's surprise on that one. He's just sort of like, until he shows that his body can withstand the rigors of an NBA season, I don't think we can trust him much. Zion played 30 games this year. The top games played guy was Yves Missi, the rookie, who played 73. And then of rotation players, the next highest number was CJ McCollum at 56, and he ain't there no more. So basically everybody missed 30 to 40% of the season or more. Dejounte Murray blew a tire at the end of January, so he'll be back probably sometime in the December, January range. If you had to guess, maybe he comes back a little bit sooner than that if everything goes according to plan. Trey Murphy was having an incredible fantasy season and then blew out his shoulder. Herb Jones played only 20 games before he went down. It was a mess. And finally, Pelicans waited a long time to do it, but finally they pulled the plug with like 2 or 3 weeks to go and then shut everybody down, even if they were actually healthy at that point, which, mind you, wasn't very many guys. So as the Pels turn the page to this year, again, sportsbooks think they're going to be awful. I'm not as convinced that they're going to be that terrible, but a lot of it does, again, come down to whether or not their key components can actually stay on the floor. And I just, I don't believe that Zion's going to be a guy who's playing 70 ball games annually, but also 30 was painfully low. The good news on Zion is he played 70 the year before, and he is a force on offense when he's going. He's a dumpster fire at the free throw line. So if you're planning on competing at all in foul shooting, he's simply not a guy that you should have on your team, because he's going to get drafted way higher than he should by people that are punting free throws. Zion's a second rounder if you're punting foul shooting. Like, he was absolutely spectacular without free throws at 25, 7, and 5. 2 defensive stats, high volume, 57% from the field. but ultra high volume, 65.5% at the free throw line. So that's the big tank there. So it's easier to say, and it's not entirely accurate, but it's easier to say if you're actually attempting to win free throws, just don't draft Zion, because he's simply not going to fall as far as you would need him to make the math work out. He's so bad at foul shooting that, he's like edge of the top 100 when you include free throws, and he's a second rounder when you don't. You're not going to be able to draft him at the edge of the top 100. Zion's going to be a guy who goes around 50, kind of regardless of what else is going on in the Zion Williamson fantasy universe. That's just where he's going to go, because he scores in boards and gets some steals, and he's a good field goal percent guy. And he does a lot of stuff out there, but he has obviously that one polar negative that you can't really ignore. If you are punting free throws, you probably want to hyper target him, because it's not often that you can get a second round punt free throw guy outside the third or fourth round. And there's, I think, a very real chance that you could get him in the fifth. But man, that injury stuff is a real pain, and you've got to be careful. I realized I didn't actually put Zion on the board for YouTubers, but I will now. So you can see the progression here for Zion. He's 25, so he's still young, so there's still a chance that he could get this thing turned around. But this will be his 6th season, and he's missed, 60% of games in a given year, 3 out of his 5 years. He missed 48. That was a COVID year. Then 11, which is not terrible. Then he missed 53, then 12, then 52. I guess by that account, he's due for a slightly better health season, but I don't think you can just assume it's going to alternate on and off. Next player I want to talk about is Dejounte Murray. Now, he's one of those guys that's going to be, I don't think that you can draft him. But also, most of my leagues only have 1, maybe 2 IL slots. I don't like playing in the Yahoo public prize head-to-head leagues, because I detest head-to-head leagues where moves are fab overnight. Because too many, especially when your fantasy playoffs come around, you've got half your team getting ruled out at 2 p.m. Pacific time, 5 Eastern. And it'd be nice to be able to make a roster move at that point to address a guy that just isn't going to play for a couple of days. But you can't, because you would have had to make that move at midnight the night before. And, you got to just set it and forget it. And you've got to set, backup moves to your preliminary moves and all this stuff. And that's fine in Roto, where you can set up a 9-move flow chart. And, it doesn't cost you if a bunch of things get executed. You use 3 moves in a given night. It's not the end of the world. Head-to-head, you want to use 1, but you want to also make sure that you use that 1. You don't want to get caught with a 0 there. So you set a backup to a backup, and you end up with a player that you didn't really want anyway. It's a disaster. I hate it. Hate it. I get that fab budget free agency is the more fair way, because it doesn't favor whoever can stay up till 12:01 a.m. Pacific time. Sure. Okay, that's fine. But in the head-to-head playoffs, I often make my moves at the last possible second, so I don't end up picking up a player who ends up then sitting out a ball game. And in a games cap roto format, you can do next day moves, because who cares? You're not streaming for games played in that format. So because of that, this brings us back to Dejounte Murray. If you have a bunch of IL slots, and maybe you do, maybe you set up your own head-to-head league where you have 3 IL slots. Okay, I guess you could draft Dejounte somewhere late, wherever the hell he ends up going this coming season. He's a guy that, when he's healthy, he kind of goes late 30s, early 40s kind of range. And he probably would have ended up somewhere in that neck of the woods when field goal percent leveled off in the low to mid 40s instead of 39. Because this last year he was number 66, but also he shot a ridiculously low 39%. I don't think that was going to hold all season long. But again, now coming off an injury, it's hard to know how far he's going to fall. Especially when it's not that he's just coming off the injury, but that he's likely to miss the first, want to call it 2 months? I don't know, maybe a little bit less. He's a younger guy, but I mean, this is a big injury. And even when he comes back, he ain't going to be playing in back-to-backs, and it's going to be a slow ramp up. So my expectation is Dejounte Murray's playing full minutes about 1 full year after he got injured. And his final game this past season, as YouTubers can see on your screen, was January 31st. He played the first 8 minutes against Boston, and then he was done. He can put up a lot of stats, that's for damn sure. And on a Pelicans team that half the team is always hurt, like that could end up working out in his favor. But I don't think you can expect that you're going to get useful fantasy stuff out of Dejounte Murray until 2026. Anything better than that is gravy, which means you have to expect that he's going to miss at least 30 games this coming year. So then you have to make the call on whether that's worth it. What if you have to get him in the 7th round? I don't know, man. Like, there were pretty good players going in the 7th round this last year that were good for the whole year. If you're in a, and I have to throw in this little caveat because I'm in a league like this. It's a keeper league where you can hold guys with a 2-round penalty for the following year. So if you drafted Dejounte in the 8th round this coming season and he was not very good for you, you could keep him as a 6th rounder the following year, and that would probably be some kind of value. But even that's like, it's not a league-winning type of move. You know, if you get Dejounte not this coming year, but the 2026 season as a 6th rounder, what's that, like a 2-round value, and you had to squat on him for 1 bad year? To me, that's not even really worth it. If you have a ton of IL slots, it's a different universe. You know, you could get him, squat on him, hope for these good for you for your head-to-head playoffs or whatever. And if you're in a Games Cap Roto format, you don't even need IL slots because you probably don't have to start all 13 to 15 of your guys anyway. And so there's that. But I would remind you guys that one of the main tenets that we have here on Old Man Squad Fantasy Basketball is don't draft guys that are hurt to start the year, because ultimately you're going to need those roster spots. If you're in head-to-head, even if you have 3 IL slots, there's probably going to be a point this season where you have more than 3 guys injured. Let's say that there's like a 30% chance of that happening. I mean, I think it's higher than that, but just for argument's sake, let's say it's lower and call it 30. What do you think the odds are that at any point this year you're going to have 2 guys injured? I think most of you would agree that the odds of you having 2 guys injured on your team at some point this year is basically 100%. Basically. It's an asymptote approaching 100. It seems very likely. So in that instance, if you had Dejounte Murray occupying that first IL slot, and you think it's almost 100% chance that you're going to have 2 guys injured at some point, that means that you have about 100% chance of having a full IL. That is dicey, because if you have an IL plus thing going on, you can't stuff a guy there. If some other dude on your team gets hurt, you can't stash them there. It becomes important. It's almost like, it's not inevitable because every once in a while a team will sort of slip through without having a massive injury bug. But this day and age, it feels almost inevitable that you're going to need all 3 of your IL slots in a 3 IL league. And if you're in a 1 or 2, you will definitely need them both. Or all or both or whatever word fits the sentence properly. So I don't think I'm drafting Dejounte Murray this year. I understand that there's going to be a lure to get him, 4 rounds later than last year, and just hope that he's back by, early December or something like that. And maybe that works out for that team. Maybe they're getting a full bore Dejounte Murray by mid-January and they spent an 8th rounder on him. But maybe that team is already kind of in the fryer by the time he comes back. Maybe they don't have a good enough team to weather his absence. Or maybe there's a team that got 2 other guys hurt. So I'm probably going to pass. How about this young man? Let's talk Trey Murphy, who is a very, very good basketball player and a very good fantasy basketball player. He's a guy that, of course, did more because a lot of his games came when at least one, maybe multiple of the other higher usage Pelicans were out. But the good news for Trey Murphy is that he's now played himself into a large usage role. He's shown them that he's one of, if not their best, all-around offensive basketball player. Certainly the best floor spacer on the team. Great foul shooter, gets steals, gets blocks, hits threes without tanking your field goal percent. He wasn't great, but like to get 3 threes a game on a guy shooting over 45%, you'll generally take that. Especially for someone that you're able to draft a little bit later. I don't have the first flipping clue where Trey Murphy is going to get drafted this year, but it feels like he should probably get drafted around 50. Because he was top 30 last year with a big usage role. That's going to get shaved a bit. I don't know, man. Like maybe, Dan, we need to take it. Let's talk to ourselves. Dan, you got to take a step backwards. Because remember, we just talked about how Dejounte Murray is going to miss probably the first 6 to 10 weeks of the season, some number in there. That's a lot left on the table. So now you got Zion, and we'll talk about Jordan Poole in a minute, but Zion, Jordan Poole, and Trey Murphy are going to be the guys taking shots until Dejounte Murray gets back, and then you can slot in one more. So it does kind of feel like Trey Murphy might open the year gangbusters. All right, I'm going to retool this discussion. Let's go back and we're going to redo the Trey Murphy discussion. I think he's a guy that you consider drafting early and then trying to maybe move him before the Pelicans get Dejounte Murray back. Not that I think Trey Murphy is going to like lose all of his job at that point, but Dejounte is going to be the primary ball handler. He and Zion will be. And then Trey Murphy's going to have to go back to kind of going to get his, where as the number 2 option behind Zion, there's just going to be stuff there for him. He doesn't have to go get it. It'll just be there. Sort of hand wavy. I know. I'm aware of it, even as I'm saying it. But what does that mean for draft position? I don't think you're going to take him in the 3rd round. That's a lot of draft capital to spend. But I mean, I think he'll probably go in the 4th. If I had to guess, I think Trey Murphy probably goes in the 4th round, and you might want to do it. He may very well be better than that to start the year. I don't know that we can bank on this happening, but he did have a season where he shot almost 41% from 3. You guys can see it. That was 2022, 2023. If his 3-point percent goes back up to 30, he was at 36 this last year. If his 3-point percent goes back up to 39, his overall field goal percent probably goes up by 1.5. And now suddenly he's shooting 47% with that same overall fantasy output. That dude is coasting into 2nd round value for as long as that lasts. It's hard to say no. It's hard to say no to Trey Murphy, but I don't think I can take him in the 3rd round. I think you want guys in the 3rd round that feel a little bit more building block-ish. And Trey Murphy is more of the this dude is good at a whole bunch of stuff, which is fine. It sort of kicks the can down the road for building a team build. And maybe that makes more sense on the 9-cat roto side, which you guys know I generally gravitate that way anyway. But I also know that most of you guys play head-to-head, and Trey Murphy is slightly less enticing in head-to-head, if only because, it's that same sort of Kevin Durant-ish sort of appeal where there isn't really a weakness. So there isn't a team build that he slots into, and everybody's always looking for team build. But, admittedly, you don't have to. All right, let's talk Jordan Poole, because this is a dude. Now, he and CJ McCollum basically just got swapped. It's almost piece for piece. Do we think, I think there's only one question we need to answer with Jordan Poole, and it's, do we think he can get the same number of shots in New Orleans that he got in Washington? I'm inclined to think the answer is long-term, no. Short-term, maybe. And to me, again, a lot of it comes down to how long Dejounte Murray is out. Because Jordan Poole, he really flexed this last year. While the Wizards were also kind of holding him in check. He averaged 20 points, 3 boards, 4.5 assists, 1.3 steals, and 3.5 3-pointers on 43% shooting from the field and 88% at the free throw line. This was, by all accounts, a very good year for Jordan Poole. The only thing that wasn't particularly good was turnovers, and you probably don't care that much about that anyway, because you knew it wasn't going to be great coming in. I would assume the turnovers come way down. I also think, by the way, that when this Pelicans team is fully healthy, Poole is probably the sixth-man gunner type coming off the bench. But he might have no choice but to take Dejounte Murray's starting spot in the near term. We'll see. They might keep him in that sixth-man gunner spot anyway. So will he get up to 15.5 shots per game? Probably not. I don't think it's going to have the same measure of freedom. Even if you think the minutes are close to the same, and even if you think that, there should be the role that CJ McCollum left behind, which was 17 shots a night, I don't think that Jordan Poole, I should say, drops straight into the leadership role that McCollum had. The reason that CJ got 18 shots a game, which, by the way, was the most on the Pelicans this year, the reason he got those was because he's the established guy. He was the old man on campus. Jordan Poole will not be that. The rest of these guys will all have been there longer. So you can't just take this McCollum 18 shots and give it to Jordan Poole. I think in anything, although again, if they keep mentioning Dejounte Murray and his 16 shots and 7 assists being on the shelf, long-term, Jordan Poole will slot in behind all of these other guys. But can we look at Poole and say, is 14 shots reachable? I think probably yes, certainly while Murray is out. Because in that instance, it's going to go Zion, then Trey Murphy. Those are going to be your big game guys. And then you've got all these other dudes we've talked about. You've got Herb Jones, who's not a high-usage guy. You've got Jose Alvarado, Yves Missi. These guys are not high-usage dudes. You've got Jordan Hawkins, I think, is still there, right? Is Hawkins still there? Yeah, he's still there. They drafted Jeremiah Fears. I think Derek Queen is out for a while, but they've got these young guys that they might drop into things a little bit. All these guys are going to take some chunk of the CJ McCollum stuff. And then Jordan Poole, does he take the biggest chunk of it? Probably. With all the stuff out there, with McCollum gone and with Murray on the shelf, Poole will probably have no choice but to do about as much as he did in Washington last year. So much like with Trey Murphy before him, I do think there's a value in overdrafting Pelicans at the beginning of the year just slightly. Not Dejounte, because a lot of these guys are likely to get off to pretty good starts while they're waiting for their second highest usage guy to come back. What I don't know is, will there be any takers in the fantasy space if you then tried to move these guys? You probably would have to try to move them at an ever so slight discount. So the hope then is that maybe you could get Jordan Poole in the 80s on draft night, and maybe he gets off to a top 60, call it top 50 range start. And maybe you could sell him for number 65, 70 along the way. But that's a lot of work for one round of cashing. Especially when you know that Poole's role is going to shrink as we go. At least the good news on Trey Murphy is that his fantasy game is incredibly robust, and it'll be able to withstand a Dejounte return, I think, a little bit better than Jordan Poole's will, because you'll see the assists, the shots, all that stuff kind of goes down together. But do I think Jordan Poole is a top 100 player on the season? Yeah, probably. Will he be top 75 to start the year? Also probably. Let's talk Yves Missi next on the show, which again is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel, who have the Pelicans with an over-under, a season win total mark of 29.5. What are you guys thinking about that so far? The more I talk through this team, the more I think they're going to lose a whole bunch of ball games at the beginning of the year. So I don't know that I have the stones to bet it over, which feels wild because 30 wins is not that hard to get to. I mean, you'd think, but like, think about what teams got to 30 wins in the Western Conference this last year. San Antonio got to 34, Portland 36, Phoenix only got to 36. You're betting on health. That's the worst kind of bet to make because you don't have you have almost no way to handicap it. I think you have to assume that the health is not going to be particularly good. So I don't know. If this team's healthy, I think they go over. If they're not, I think they go under. So that, to me, is probably how you look at it. And that's probably why FanDuel has the line at 29.5 with the over at slightly lower VIG than the under. Over is at minus 112. The under is at minus 118. They're plus 46,000 to win the NBA title. Don't do that. So you get yourself in trouble. But there's so many other things you can do with our new pals at FanDuel. I'm very excited about what we've got cooking here with our new partners. So Yves Missi, if you missed last year, was number 191 in 27 minutes a game. And you may ask yourself, I'm about to do Let the Days Go By. How was Yves Missi if you were punting free throws? And the answer was he was basically right on the borderline of fantasy startable if you were punting free throws because he was taking about 3 a game at 62%. He was not good there. He was at 9 points, 8 rebounds, 1.3 blocks, half a steal, 55% from the field. The problem with Yves Missi is that I don't think the Pelicans are trying to grow him into a 32-minute-a-game starting center because he's limited offensively. They brought in a veteran backstop in Kevon Looney. I don't know what he's necessarily going to do anything there. If Derek Queen gets healthy at some point this year, he could sort of slice into what Missi is doing. And then Zion's going to play small ball center. You're going to see that regularly out of a Pelicans team, especially if they fall behind. Then they're going to need offense over defense. They sort of just can't afford to have a guy out there who doesn't help them on the offensive side. So my drafting Yves Missi, I think we can keep this one relatively simple, and I'm telling you guys, I'm probably not. Even at the way tail end of a draft, I guess at that point you could look at it because the other options are probably not going to be starters. And Missi will get you rebounds and will get you blocks. And what if he plays 28 minutes instead of 27? But the fantasy game is not great so far for Missi. It doesn't translate that well. He would need to rebound more. He would need to be, frankly, better at field goal percent because 55% is not good enough when you don't do anything else on offense. And then I don't expect the free throw number to get better. So best to leave Missi alone and let somebody else take the plunge. However, on the other side of the will I, won't I coin, I do think that Herb Jones could secretly have a really good fantasy season. Now, you might have missed it this last year, and you couldn't be blamed if you did. Herb Jones got off to a really slow start. Hard to say that he got any kind of finish because dude played only 20 ball games. But he shot just 43.5% from the field. This is a career 48%er, mostly because the three-pointers weren't dropping. He shot 31% from downtown in his 20 games this year after shooting 42% last season. But this is a guy who's a good foul shooter, mid-80s. He's a terrific defensive stats guy, usually over 2 combined per game. And so if you're looking for that cheap 3-and-D guy, let me present to you Mr. Herb Jones, who I think is prime to have an excellent year. Now, this is a guy who's sort of like entering his prime. I don't think you can expect massive improvements across the board, but he's a guy that's so good at what he does that the Pels are going to want to keep him on the floor. I know what you're thinking. Dan, this guy played starters minutes last year, and he was number 111 in fantasy. I don't care. Why don't I care? Because that seems like a stupid thing to say. You should always care about that stuff. Because, and we saw it as we were going, as Herb Jones began to settle in this past year, he just got better and better and better until he got hurt. When were his injuries? Because he was like, I think he was out to start the year. Did he play opening day? Yes, he did. Then he missed the entire month of November, and then he played December, and that was basically it. So if you want to find out, like, what did Herb Jones look like as he started to get his legs underneath him, I would suggest looking at, like, after he got his legs back in December and for the rest of that month. What did he play? 16 December games? Let's go a little bit later. 14. Yeah, and he just, like, he wasn't shooting, but he was getting 9 shots a game. And this is, like, a lot of the guys were still in for this. McCollum was still in. Trey Murphy was in. Dejounte was in during this stretch. This was when he was actually playing. So now you got a Herb Jones where there's no McCollum, and the guy they got from McCollum is probably going to be coming off the bench. Zion and Trey Murphy are going to be sort of setting things up. Yves Missi is not a high usage guy. You might get Herb Jones comfortably, it's a stretch, comfortably taking 9.5 to 10 shots per ball game to start the year. And Herb Jones engaged on offense, especially if that field goal percent comes back up to 46, 47, 48, somewhere in that neck of the woods. That guy will pile up fantasy stats. That guy will get you, a dozen points, which is not huge, but 1.5 threes and 4 rebounds and 3.5 to 4 assists and almost 2 steals and over half a block on good free throw percent. That's a 3-and-D superstar who I don't think he's going to get drafted inside the top 100. Not after a disappointing injury-prone season on a team that, could the Pelicans go into a tank mode at the end of the year? I guess it's possible. I think they're probably going to try this year. Now, if they start selling off pieces, all of this entire episode goes right into the toilet. But Herb Jones is so good. He's so good at what they need him to do, which is 3-and-D. He also had weirdly high turnovers this year. I don't know if that's going to stick. If the assists are higher, that's fine. I'll take the half turnover if you're going to get me an extra, 1 assist per game. But I really think Herb Jones could be a top 80, top 75, even top 70 fantasy play before Dejounte Murray comes back. And I frankly don't know that it's going to change all that much even when Dejounte comes back, because I believe pretty strongly that Herb Jones is the 5th starter on this team and Jordan Poole is the 6th man. And that leaves more than enough opportunity for Herb because they love what he does defensively. Love it. He might not be the best offensive player, but he is one of their most valuable players. Give me Herb or give me death. I do think I'm going to end up with a handful of Pelicans on my team, at least to start this coming year, and then I'm going to be yelling at you guys to try to sell when everything's going right. But among them, the ones that certainly catch your eye the most would be Trey Murphy, who's going to cost you, unfortunately. Herb Jones, who I don't think is going to cost you that much. And then maybe you take a flyer on Jordan Poole. I think Dejounte is too risky to sit on because you just need those roster spots. And I think Zion's too risky because Zion, you guys know. Enjoy your weekend, everybody. We're FanDuel now here on the Believe Network. Pretty damn cool. Check them out when you can. I'm Dan Vespers. Like, rate, subscribe, and I'll see you Monday.